In my last two videos, I showed you how I planned and blocked in a John Singer Sargent master copy. But when it came time to finish, I hit a wall. The color in my skin tones was off, and it just felt like enough to stall the whole process. And if you've ever found yourself stuck in the same spot trying to mix color that feels alive, well, you're not alone. So today I'm breaking down every single color mixing exercise I use to help painters finally get confident with color, especially if you're aiming for that loose painterly style that we love in the work of artists like Sargent. This video today isn't theory. These are hands-on, studio-ready tools that actually work. And I've made this even easier for you. I put together a free guide that recaps every single exercise in today's video, plus links to video demos for each one so you can see them in action step by step. The link is in the description to that free guide. Go ahead and grab your copy now and let's dive in. So this came up for me in my most recent painting. You might have seen, if you've been following my YouTube channel for a while, this painting in progress behind me. This is a John Singer Sargent master copy. Let me see if I can actually have it kind of focus on this. Great. And I reached a point on this where I had kind of just hit a wall. Like, I had been following all of the tools that I know to help me get an accurate drawing, good value control, accurate color. But I could tell that there was just some disconnect there, and I wasn't quite sure how to overcome it. This is super common. It happens to painters of all skill levels. It just typically happens at different stages in the painting, depending on the person and maybe how much experience or comfort you have when it comes to color mixing. So the good news is that the solutions that I'm going to be discussing today and the specific solution that I'm going to demo on this, you can apply no matter your skill level. In fact, not only is this a tool that I recommend to all of my oil painting students who work with me directly, it's also the exact tool that I use myself. There's a reason why I'm demoing this today, because it's exactly what I need to bring this painting to a successful finish. So before we dive in, there's just one thing that I needed beyond my painting itself in order to help me out here. And that is this. This is the actual John Singer Sargent painting that I was working off of. Okay, not the actual painting, that would be bananas. My YouTube channel isn't big enough for me to be able to just buy a John Singer Sargent painting. That would be absurd. No, this is like a $5 print from Walgreens that I had printed off. And this is going to be way more valuable than $5 when everything is said and done. And you're going to see exactly why. So I've just taped this to the back of the little packet that it came in. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to prop this up next to my actual painting. Before I go any further, I need to give you a little bit of context here. I am not working off of a screen for this, and I will explain why as I go along. I also am trying to help myself out by keeping this as close to the size of my painting as possible. Now, I kind of made the mistake of diving into the painting first and then using this Walgreens print off to help me out later. And unfortunately, I couldn't match the size. So just know as we go along, this isn't something you'll probably want to do with like an iPad screen or a laptop screen or a computer monitor in general. This is something you actually want to have a print for. And I'm going to go ahead and explain why. All right, and to do that, I need to go ahead and move you all closer to this specific painting. All right, so let me quickly set the scene for where I left off in this John Singer Sargent master copy. Basically, I've gotten to a point where I am pretty darn happy with this likeness. I'm pretty happy with the brushwork, but where I have run into a stumbling block is in the color. I could have just left this and have the color not be exactly what I want, but it's just not really, I don't know. I'm not going to feel proud of that. So good news is that I can turn it into something really helpful for you. So when I take a look at the color of this, the main thing that stands out to me is that it's simply too pink compared to this Walgreens version, which I would say is a bit more neutral. Of course, things could show up a little bit differently on camera. You could potentially look at my version and say it looks better. Just know that this can absolutely come down to just the difference in what the camera sees versus what your computer screen looks like as compared to what it looks like here in real life. But in real life, in my studio, I would say this is a little bit overly pink, and I wanted to fix it. And so the first thing that I did was I considered that there were two reasons why this could have become too pink. The first one is that, truthfully, a lot of us, especially when painting white skin tones, we tend to have a bias toward assuming it's going to be like a pinky beige. And so when it comes to putting in things like Viridian or ultramarine to kind of dull that skin tone down, we really resist it. We don't think that our skin should look gray. And to kill the intensity of this pink, making it grayer is often exactly what's necessary. So that can be one variable in play. The next variable that can be in play is that when I blocked this in, I put in a just generic overall flesh tone, which was probably just kind of biased toward pink because it was meant to be this placeholder. And as I built up brushstroke after brushstroke on this, it is very possible that that pink underlayer kind of permeated everything else. And even if I had mixed up pretty decent color, it just would have all kind of gotten a little bit of this pink cast if I wasn't really carefully paying attention. So when it comes to portraits, I think these two things are pretty common across the board. There's a possibility that if you're watching this video because you want help with portrait painting specifically, that you could be running into either one of these issues. So when it comes to your own work, both of these things can absolutely be happening. Here's how you know which one might be coming into play more for yourself. If you find that overall your finished portraits are simply looking too pink across the board, there is a chance that you are probably resisting dulling out your skin tones as much as really needs to be happening. And I think this is probably the more common thing that's happening for people. And it's one that I think it's important to be on the lookout for. I know that I'm on the lookout for this whenever I'm working on my own portraits. And when I look back at my own work, oftentimes, one of my biggest critiques is, one, I'm not quite getting the value ranges I want, so I'm not necessarily getting the sense of form or depth that is possible. And then the other critique I have when I take a look at my own work is that often my skin tones are still just a little bit brighter and more vibrant than I want them to be, and I would say specifically, they're too warm. So, taking a look at these two examples here, the Sargent reference and then my painting in progress, I have a couple of options. I can let this be, or I can go ahead and work to correct it. So that brings me to the exercise that I'm going to walk you through today. So this is where my little Walgreens print is going to come in and save the day. Now, I talked a little bit about why I'm using this Walgreens print versus using something like a screen. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that right now. The importance of having a really good print that you're going to work off of as a reference. So in my case, I already had a really good image of this excerpt of a John Singer Sargent portrait, this detail of a John Singer Sargent portrait that I was working off of on my screen. But in order to do this color correction exercise, it really becomes easiest if I am working off of a physical copy of the reference. And if there is part of you that thinks, okay, well, I have a printer at home, I'll just print this off myself. Please learn from my experience. Please. So earlier in my painting journey, I absolutely had delusions of running a print business. And so I got a really nice printer with fantastic color. It could create really phenomenal prints. And boy, let me tell you, was that the biggest headache of a piece of equipment I have ever owned. I had these dreams in my head that, one, I would just put videos on YouTube and people would just be constantly flooding my inbox with print orders, and I could just hit print on my printer and it would be like printing money. And what an incredible dream that is. That is not what happens. That's not what happens with print businesses. Here's what happened instead. One, my print orders constituted less than 1% of my revenue in any given year of my art business. And every time I got a print order, it resulted in hours of screaming at the printer, grumbling at my computer, wanting to throw the thing out the window, wishing that there were some expert I could call to figure out why the heck these prints were coming out looking absolutely wild when it came to the color. Eventually, a friend took my printer away because I never wanted to look at it ever again, and I told myself that if someone wanted a print of my work, I would simply go to a professional shop and have them print it for me. And boy, was that a really, really wise decision. So, coming back to this Sargent reference, I don't need a fancy printer. In fact, even if I have a pretty good printer, I don't want to deal with this. I just want to take it to a professional print shop where everything is color calibrated and I can simply place the order and go and pick it up 5 minutes later. And that's exactly what Walgreens does. It's super cheap. It's 5 minutes away from my house. I can simply go, and what I pick up should actually just look like exactly the way this thing looked on my computer. And that's what I want. So we now have my handy dandy Sargent reference. All I need to do to start to correct what I have on my painting is to go ahead and put them up side by side. And all I need to do is to take my palette knife, and I'm going to go ahead and start by looking at these two pieces and trying to identify, okay, where is the biggest discrepancy? In my case, probably the largest discrepancy would be in all of the flesh tones, but there's not like one single area that seems like an approachable starting point, whereas the top of the hair here kind of seems like low-hanging fruit. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. I can tell that what I have up top is a little bit too warm, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix up the correct color, which is a little bit more biased toward green versus the brown that I have down on this painting. So all I'm going to do for this is grab my palette knife. I'm going to mix up a green that I think looks like the correct color. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to place the palette knife over this part of the reference. And I'm going to see if it looks correct. Now, in the case of working on this particular painting, when I first mixed this up, it was a little bit too light in value. And so I had to mix in a little bit more of my Viridian and my transparent oxide brown, and I had to darken it up again. And essentially all I did once I had taken that step was to just hold it back up over my print once again, until the tip of the palette knife that actually had the paint on it would just disappear. That is a sign that not only is this the correct value, it's also the correct hue and the correct saturation. And if I actually have that mix up correctly, and I like the color that's in my Sargent print, I can just go ahead and safely put it over into my painting. Now, at first when I do this, I noticed this actually looks really, really wrong. And this is probably what's happening to you in your own paintings as well. You actually probably mix the accurate color more often than you think, but when you go to put it on canvas, you find that it just feels really off. And so you second guess yourself and you land on a color that seems more palatable, more believable for where you are. But we just saw from my own test that it's really easy to have something that we have just absolutely checked is correct. And then when I put it on my painting, it looks wrong. So I do have to simply trust the process to a certain extent. That actually is really important. If you are working on a painting and you decide to go ahead and work off of a print as your reference versus working off of a screen, you can save yourself a lot of heartache here, because you should actually have the right colors right from the very beginning, and you can actually start to do this process right from the get-go. So you shouldn't run into the issue that I've run into, where the entire cast of this painting feels a little bit too warm, a little bit too reddish. I'm having to do something a little bit more difficult, which is to reconcile what I have down from my earlier passes where I wasn't using this trick with this print off that I now have. But it is really important, once you are using this approach, you really need to actually trust what it is showing you. And in this case, it's showing me, without a shadow of a doubt, that the color of the hair needs to be this green. And if this now looks inaccurate relative to the rest of my painting, I need to trust the process and I need to actually correct those other parts of the painting itself. So once I've gone ahead and put in this green for the top of the hair, What I need to go ahead and do next is I need to decide what needs to change now. What is the next thing that seems inaccurate or distracting? And if I simply proceed through the rest of the portrait like this, I will ultimately transform it to have the color that is correct. So on this particular piece, what I think would actually make sense would be for me to start working through the adjacent areas to this area of the hair that I just filled in. So maybe I'll go ahead and fill in the shadow shape that's just to the left, or start to work into the rest of the hair areas. Then I might start to work the forehead, which is a very warm pinkish area that's adjacent to what I just adjusted. But essentially, I need to go through and make sure that I actually adjust everything in the painting that's causing a problem until I no longer feel like there are any strange discrepancies or areas where the color just doesn't look harmonious. Really quickly, I want to go back to this question of why I am not using a screen. Here's the problem with using a screen for this task. The thing is, right now, the way I have all of this set up is that I have my canvas, I have my reference, they're all under the same light source. Same for the palette actually as well. So I have all three of these things being lit the same way, and that's going to make it way easier for me to compare color and make sure that if something looks correct over here, it should be correct over here. Or if something looks correct on the palette, it should be correct when I put it onto the final painting. So here's the rub when it comes to using screens. Screens are their own light source, and they can really throw off our eye's ability to use this exercise that I'm describing. If everything is under the same light and I have this paint loaded up on my palette knife here, and I simply hold it over the relevant area of the reference, and then I can safely apply it to my painting really confidently, what happens when this reference is its own light source and it is casting a shadow onto my tool? Well, the answer is that it can actually really throw off our perception of what is correct. This is true anytime the lighting is different between the palette, the canvas, and the reference material. So to simplify things, I would not recommend attempting this using a laptop or a tablet or any other kind of screen. Instead, I know this sounds like a Walgreens commercial. It really isn't. It's just so much nicer than the guesswork of a screen. And it's so much nicer than having to do battle with your own printer or dealing with what happens when you actually go ahead and you print something and it looks like the image, but all the colors seem to have a weird cast to it. The last thing you want to be doing is to say, all right, I got this print. I made it off of my own computer. I can see the image just fine. The colors look a little bit weird over here, but that's okay. I'll just fix it. Famous last words in a painting. What we want to be doing, it is such a creative task. The last thing we actually want to do is to have to make additional creative decisions when we're trying to actually get something onto canvas accurately. We want to be creative in our plan. We want to go into the painting with a real clear vision of what that creativity is. We don't want to have to creatively problem solve because we're painting by the seat of our pants and saying, this is a little green for my taste. Maybe I'll gray it up in the painting. It's a really easy way to have one section of the painting that's just not harmonizing correctly with the rest of the painting. So when you get your print, you want to look at it and you want to ask yourself, if my painting had these colors, would I be happy? And that's the thing. When I look at this print, the answer is yes. So I need to trust what the print is telling me when I'm comparing it with my actual painting. That way, if I see a clear, hey, this color is incorrect, I know exactly what has to happen to correct it. So I hope this has officially dissuaded you from continuing to work off of a screen if color has been a challenge. Same thing, I hope this has dissuaded you from deciding mid-painting to simply change some of the color in your reference. If you are perpetually frustrated by the color that you're getting, chances are it needs to be corrected in the planning process, not something that you actually need to fix when you're trying to actually get the image onto canvas successfully. So that's how I'm tackling this painting. But what if color is a struggle in every piece that you paint? If mixing still feels like a guessing game, or if you're stuck thinking, why does this look dull? That's your signal. So in the second half of this video, I'm gonna walk you through my favorite exercises to help you build color confidence fast. Each one is designed to isolate color as a skill, so you stop overthinking and start seeing results in the studio. Remember, all of them plus the demo links are waiting for you in that free PDF guide in the description. Go ahead and grab it now, and let's level up your color game together. All right, so first things first, what I've just walked you through is an example where I am working on a Sargent master copy. This piece already has tremendous color that I'm looking to learn from, and I'm not necessarily trying to deviate off of anything Sargent has done. But what happens when you're working on your own original piece? Well, you can absolutely take the same approach. If you're planning on working off of a photo reference and you would typically just have that photo reference on screen, if you like the color of that photo reference, you can go ahead and have it printed and apply this exact same process to that particular composition. You can also take this a step further and create a mock-up for a final painting. This is a little, 6x8 version of a mock-up for a larger piece that I created. And that is exactly the purpose of this. It's to show me what the final composition should be, and also to show me what the colors should be. And I could simply put this up next to my blank canvas at the easel and use this as a guide and continue to simply mix up color, hold it over, see if it's correct, and then apply it to the final painting. So it's not just something that you have to go get a print for, although a print is really nice when you're working off of some kind of image that doesn't require any further edits. I actually really like doing this with a digital mock-up, and you all have seen me work off of digital mock-ups quite a few times on this channel. So you could have a digital mock-up printed, or you could simply paint your mock-up, and if you like the color of it, you can use this process to make sure that your color stays accurate as you translate your mock-up to the final product. But I promised you some additional exercises like this as well. So let's go ahead and start with a similar exercise that requires no setup, no cleanup. In fact, it's something that you can do really quickly and basically on your own time. So I didn't just have this larger version of the Sargent image printed. I also had a little 5x7 printed at the same time. And what you can do if you have a nice print like this is you can simply head across the street to your nearest hardware store. That's what I did in my case. And you can take your print with you. And you can go to that section of the hardware store where they have all of the paint chips. You know, those like little samples for the different colors that you can paint your walls. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to take your print in, and you are going to actively look for paint chips that match certain colors in the image. And you are essentially playing the same fundamental game of matching color the way we just did with the palette knife. And what you can do is you can actually find a paint chip for virtually every color that's in the image. Now, there are a couple of limitations with this. One, hardware stores don't necessarily have every color that your palette is capable of mixing because most people don't paint the interior walls of their house pure black or really dark brown. It's just not something people really do. So some colors you're not really going to see. But for me, I went just to the local Sherwin-Williams that was across from the pharmacy where I had this printed. And it turned out they have a lot of paint colors. So this actually made this really easy. The other thing is all these little paint chips are free. So you can come away with like, I don't know, what do I have from the last time I went there? Probably have like 40 of these little paint chips. I probably spent 10-15 minutes in there checking all the color to the reference that I had. And if I actually show you the print that I'm using, last time I got these paint chips, I was using this print of a Cecilia Bow piece. I came away with virtually every color that is in this painting anywhere. It's not 100% perfect, but it's really darn close. And the amazing thing about doing this little exercise, it doesn't require putting out paint. It doesn't require wasting paint. It doesn't require cleaning up your brushes after. It doesn't even require a lot of dedicated time because you don't necessarily need to get every color in here captured in one go. It's something that you can kind of just do 5 minutes at a time. And the cool thing is that you're actively flexing all of the same color mixing and matching muscles that you would when you're painting. It's true that you're not necessarily putting pigments together, but you are having to figure out, all right, how close of a match is this yellow for the lapel of his shirt, and what actually needs to change if I do need to get a match. Does it need to be lighter or darker? Does it need to be more of a green or more of an orange? Does it need to be more saturated or less saturated? Or another way to put that is, does it need to be higher chroma or lower chroma? Those are the only 3 questions that you need to answer in order to be able to perfectly match something, assuming that the correct color does exist on a swatch. But that's not the only thing you can do. You can actually take this a step further. And when you take these paint chips home, you can put your mixing skills to the test. That's what I've actually done on this paint chip right here. This is a little bit tough to see, but right at the very top, you should be able to see that I actually have little tiny daubs of paint on there. And this is from where I actually tried matching this exact purple. So what's really cool about combining these exercises is that if you just go get a print, you already get a lot of practice understanding what colors are in this piece just by getting these swatches. Then, to make sure that you actually know how to mix these colors up on your own palette, you can practice by simply mixing the color and putting down little daubs of paint on these swatches until the daubs of paint just disappear on here. Now, this of course does involve getting some things dirty, but it is nothing compared to the time investment that's required for a finished painting. And that's really cool in my opinion, because you can just work on this in 5 to 10 minute chunks. You can just use a palette knife, which is much easier to get clean, and you only have to put out the colors that you think are necessary for the swatches that you're trying to match, so you can minimize the amount of paint that you're potentially wasting. I can make a whole video about that, but for now, I'm gonna leave it be. And then you can take this even further, and you can put your print in one of these little binder slips. And these are just like $1 or $2. I got this at Walgreens the same time I got this printed. And what's awesome about this is that you can actually take this little exercise where you put your paint daubs onto your swatch, and you can then apply that paint onto here. You can see there are these places where I've actually put down paint to test to see if I could match it. And you can see I've put down little swatches of paint to see if it disappears into the painting. And that is my proof that everything here is actually accurate. This is a great way to take a painting where you look at it and you go, I just don't know how the artist could ever get that color. Or you can take a photo reference and go, I don't know how I could ever mix up that color accurately. And you can actually prove to yourself that you really can do it. And the nice thing about these sleeves is that I'm not damaging my print if I get anything wrong. I can simply wipe paint that is inaccurate away and try again, and I can recycle this thing a whole bunch of times. And then, if that's feeling really good, you can put this to the test by doing a little color study. So in this case, this is the same as the Cecilia bow I have here. In fact, it's the exact same size. I need to block off my camera from focusing on the Sargent behind me. And you can actually take all of your color knowledge that you've learned from the previous exercises, and you can put this to use with an exercise where, as you can see, the goal here isn't to get it super detailed. It's simply to get down the core color ideas and show that you can get that color harmony in your own work. So I recently suggested this to a student of mine who said, that sounds really great, but I worry that if I were trying to do something like this, I would get really distracted by trying to get nice brushwork or trying to actually get the details of the face. Or I would get distracted by making sure that I had the anatomy down correctly. Basically, this is a long-winded way of saying that she's worried that instead of focusing on color, she worries that she would focus too much on drawing and brushwork. So we can actually simplify this even further and do what I'm calling a gridded color study. So this is an image of this is a color study of a Bouguereau portrait. I believe in his case, this actually is a study as well. I will show his piece on screen so that you can see the reference for this side by side. But what's cool about this is that if I take this back a good ways, it should actually just look like a portrait. Of course, up close, it looks kind of like blocky silliness, but all I had to do for this piece, it was so much simpler than going about this one, which I did freehand. All I had to do here was take my reference, in this case, the Bouguereau. I had a row of 10 squares across, 14 squares going down, which corresponded with like the overall aspect ratio of what I was working off of. And then I just did the same thing on my canvas, and I just went one square at a time, looked at the corresponding square of the reference, and asked myself, what is the dominant color of just that square? Now, this is different than just putting a filter over the image. Computers will average together the color. This is where our brains as artists are really going to come into play. We aren't simply running a computer algorithm through this image to figure out what this should look like. We're actually having to make the decision of what is the most dominant color. So in some areas, like for instance, these skin tones, I could simply average things together. The background was so plain that I could really do the same thing, and that average wouldn't really differ too much. But in some areas like the lips, I had to make a judgment call. How dark should this really go? Same thing for the eye area. How dark should this really go? At the end of the day, this is a fun and really challenging exercise, but it does take drawing out of it and allow you to really focus solely on color. And the great thing about all of these exercises is that they just don't take that much time.
Want to see these exercises in action? I've got you. Inside that free guide, you will find direct links to step-by-step demos for every color exercise that I shared today. No guesswork, no fluff. Plus, I added a bonus at the end that breaks down how I used each of these exercises to create a painting that won the Oil Painters of America gold medal. Yeah, that's how powerful this practice is. Click the link in the description if you haven't already to get your copy. Then let me know in the comments. Tell me which exercise are you most excited to try first. I can't wait to see how it goes, and until next time, happy painting.